Okay, check this out. We've got a large lever action rifle made in the mid-1880s in 45-85. Kind of a hopped up version of the 45-70, if you will. My pinky finger. Now, of course, you can't feel how smooth and easy that cycles, but I think you can get a sense of just how smooth this action is. Well, welcome to Wyoming Armory, right here in Cody, Wyoming. And today we're going to revisit what has been the subject of by far the most popular episode we've ever done here on our little channel. We're going to talk about the Bullard Rifle Company large frame repeating lever action rifle. Now, don't confuse these Bullard rifles with the Bullard rifles of the same era. Completely different company, completely different type of rifle, even though the name's fairly similar. Now, if you haven't seen that first episode I did on Bullard rifles, I think it posted in September of 2023. And on the title I put something like best lever gun ever. Wasn't room to put in there that, boy, it's innovative, ahead of its time, smooth action, just best lever gun ever. And boy, therein lies the problem. While the response to that was overwhelmingly positive, I did get some of the most venomous comments on that, personal attacks. It was almost like meltdowns you would expect to see on The View last Wednesday after Tuesday's election. And hopefully none of you actually watched The View. But anyway, you know, I still love all the lever actions, but there are just some things about these rifles that make them stand out. So let's take a little closer look at this one and talk a little bit more about what it is that about these rifles that make me think so highly of them. Now, here's a look at this Bullard that a customer sent in to us for repairs. And we've done quite a little bit of work to this one. Quite a few mechanical repairs. We've had to do a little stock work to it, and we'll get into those in just a little bit. But you can see it's in really nice original condition, and really a nice example of a Bullard rifle from the time. Now, I'm not going to get into the history of the Bullard Rifle Company. I did that in the first episode. But one of the things that really good things that happened after that episode was a fellow by the name of Scott Jameson, who literally wrote the book on Bullards, or in this case books on Bullards, contacted me, and we've had some good discussions about it. And in that first episode I relied on some internet information about production numbers and was vastly off. Imagine that, bad information on the internet. Anyway, Scott's kind of filled me in on it, and there were three types of Bullards made. There was a single shot variety that looks very similar to these repeaters with a similar lever. Then there was a large frame Bullard like these that they made about 1,700 of, and a small frame Bullard that they only made about 500 of. So you can imagine that there are very few of them around today. Now, there's just fantastic information in these books that Scott produced, and I've since got copies of both of them now. And as you look through them, they're just tremendous volume of information on these things, and he did a fantastic job of putting this all together. But what really helped me was the sections on disassembly and assembly. And as we go through here, there's some exploded parts pictures. Here we go. So you can see here what the inside of a Bullard looks like, and that's been extremely helpful for me as a gunsmith working on these little girls. So if you have any interest in these Bullards, these books that Scott's put together are just absolutely invaluable. Okay, so let's take a little closer look at why the Bullard cycles so much smoother and easier than other lever actions of the time. And so we're going to use Winchester 1886 for an example. Now, if we cycle an 86 and just about any other lever action from the time, we have to overcome the mainspring on the hammer to cycle it. In the case of an 86, it's the bolt. In the earlier toggle link Winchesters, it was actually the firing pin, the back of the firing pin. But you know, it's fairly easy to start with, but as we go through the cycling process, it gets harder and harder as we are compressing that mainspring. And at the end, then we got to lift that carrier as well with the same action, so it gets really stiff out there. And even on the return side, until we come off of that hammer, it's still stiff. Now it's pretty loose out in here, but when we get that bolt against that mainspring, it is stiff, and this one's it's stiffer than most. Now I do a lot of lightening mainsprings to try to get them to cycle a little bit better, but they, even at that, when we try to lighten the cycling, it's nowhere near what we get with a Bullard. So here we can see a Bullard. See this hammer here? When we start to cycle, that hammer starts to cock immediately, and now we can just see the bolt starting to protrude out of the back of the receiver here. So what's happening? The bolt isn't cocking the hammer here. Now the interesting thing about Bullards is not only do they have a bolt, but they have a breech block as well. So you can see this breech block rotates out of the way, and it's on a gear that does that. The breech block's rotating out of the way. Now the hammer is completely cocked right there, and the bolt, it hasn't even touched it. So the bolt never comes in contact with the hammer until the hammer falls, and actually the hammer falls into the breech block and not the bolt itself. So that's one of the main reasons that the Bullard is so smooth and easy, is that there's a lever in here that goes from the finger lever to the hammer that has a lot of mechanical advantage, so you don't even feel it cocking the hammer. And you certainly don't feel this breech block is very, very loose, and it's operating. You can see a couple of gears right in here. We'll take a little closer look in a minute, but those little gears are what drop the breech block out of the way, and then when we come forward, those gears pick up on little gears on that breech block and close it up. Okay, there's the first reason that it's as smooth as it is. Now let's look at another reason. Okay, when we pull the side plate off of this Bullard, we start to see just the genius of the engineering that went into these Bullard rifles. And the first thing you probably notice is a gear system. Now this action cycles on a gear system. That's one of the main reasons this thing is so smooth the way it is. Okay, so let's take a little closer look now at how the rest of the action works. Now I talked about there being an arm or a lever that cocks the hammer, and there's the end of it right there. So when we start the action, that arm is moving back and cocking the hammer. You can see that hammer cocking. Okay, now the bolt is being pushed back by that gear drive. And now when we get to the end, we see this arm rise, which is the carrier arm, and it's got a lot of leverage, so you don't even feel when it raises that carrier. Now it's got a brass carrier real similar to the toggle link Winchesters. And then we start, and here's this flat spring here holds that carrier up until, as we're returning things, now we see the gear is pulling up that breech block into place. Now the end of this arm here that cocked the hammer is now going to hit on the end of this arm that works the carrier and drop the carrier down. Really ingenious, and you know, a fairly simple design when you look at it, but the genius is coming up with it. Now the other thing that's kind of ingenious about these, if we look at the other side, there's no loading gate. Okay, these actually load like some shotguns through the bottom. If we work this up here, we actually load through a loading port into the magazine tube directly through the bottom here, which is a little different. Takes a little bit of getting used to. Now while we got this one apart, we're going to go ahead and lubricate everything really nice. It's clean as a whistle in there, but it's a little dry. Okay, so we're going to get some grease in here on these gears.
And then of course get some oil on the pivot points. We've got to get a little grease on the gears up in the bolt itself. A little bit on this back gear that opens the breech bolt. And we'll work that back and forth a little. Get some more in there. Now this rifle, when it came in, had hammer follow down. So we knew there was problems with the hammer and probably the sear, and that turned out to be the case. The half cock notch was completely broken out. It was the full cock notch was rounded off some, the sear was rounded off some. So we repaired all that, had to weld up the hammer, re-harden everything. But the culprit really was the hammer spring. Now these have kind of an oddball hammer spring, and you can't exactly go to Newmarch and get a Bullard hammer spring, so we had to repair it. And it had been repaired in the past, but not configured enough of a curve to push the sear all the way into the notches, and that's why they were all worn out. So we had to reconfigure, re-harden that spring, and now everything's functioning just right. And it should have a lot of years left in it. Now we got that gear pretty well greased up. We'll put a little bit of grease right in this joint here, and then some oil on these pivot points. And we also had to do, there was a crack in the wrist here, and where the stock bolt or the tang bolt went through was all wallered out, so we had to repin that and re-drill it. But really overall this thing is in pretty fantastic condition, and I'm going to be pretty curious to see how it shoots. Where it was smooth before, it is even more smooth now. Incredible. Now the very best part of gunsmithing on these old guns. Let's go see how she shoots. Okay, so it's time to test fire this old Bullard. We're out here at the Cody Shooting Complex today, so you'll probably hear a few rifles going off in the background. Now this is the third Bullard I'll have shot. In the first two I was just function testing, shooting milk jugs and whatnot, but today we're going to see what kind of group we can get. We're going to take a 5-shot group. We're using some Buffalo Arms 4570 black powder rounds, 405 grain that I found at a gun show recently. So we're going to be shooting the way Mother Nature intended, black powder rounds to a black powder era rifle. So let's see how the old girl groups up. Now I'm told that most of the barrels for Bullard were made by Remington, so they should fire, you would think, fairly well. I mean, the Remingtons of that time were fairly accurate as rifles went in that era. And of course we load these through the bottom, kind of like some of the shotguns we know. Little different. No loading gate on these old girls. Here we go. I just love the way these things cycle. Isn't that something? I know you can't feel it, but it's just kind of incredible. Okay, so here goes shot number one. I do believe that's in the red. Oh, jeez. All they have to do is think about cycling them and they almost cycle themselves. Okay, a little low and left it looks like. Well, it's not making a super tight group, but for a rifle of this vintage with just some old black powder rounds thrown in it, I think she's doing pretty good. Let the smoke clear. The wind's blowing in my face today. Okay, let's go see how she grouped up. Okay, so, first time shooting it with just some generic black powder loads, I'd say she's a pretty good shooter. Now this is the first one I shot here. I said I thought it was in the red. And then we had one here, and two in this ragged hole here. So, on the average, it's shooting a little bit left on windage, but boy, I got to admit, this one shoots a whole lot better than the other two Bullards I shot. Okay, so of course we can't put things away until we take a couple of shots at some milk jugs. So we're going to set up here. We've got a jug out there at 50 yards and another one out at 100 yards, and this is our second take. Now I set this same thing up, and I got some cheap Chinese batteries for my backup camera, and I drilled them, the 50 yard and the 100 yard, with the first shot the first time, but the camera kicked the bucket on me halfway through. So we put some American made batteries in it this time. We're going to see if we can't duplicate that first shot each time. Here we go. Oh, there we go. Got the first one at 50 yards. Let's see the second one now. Okay. Three in a row, let's make it 4. Oh, I missed it. Doggone it. Okay, here we go. One more time. Drilled it. So we only had one miss out of 5 shots, but man, this is a great shooting old Bullard. I wish this were mine. I'd take this one hunting. I'd feel every bit of confidence in this thing to go hunting deer with it. Well, now the fun part of shooting black powder, the cleanup. Before we get to that though, I want to talk a little bit about the value of these Bullard rifles, because there's been kind of a dramatic change recently. And since I made that video about a year ago about the Bullard rifle that I have, a whole lot more people know about them. Now, if I'd had any idea, I'd have gone out and bought a bunch of Bullards before I made that video. I don't think of my little channel as affecting the market. But that particular episode got 750,000 views. And while I'm happy if I get enough ad revenue off an episode to pay for my ammunition that I burned in that filming, that one actually paid for the rifle, and that's the only one I can even come close to saying that's happened with. Now, 750,000 views isn't anything for, say, a Hickok or a Demolition Ranch, but for our little channel, it's something else. And to affect the market like that was kind of a double-edged sword. I got to pay for that rifle, but now the value of these things has skyrocketed because so many more people know about them and like them, and there's so few of them out for sale that it's pretty difficult to find one that's reasonably priced anymore. In fact, there were a couple of them came up to auction just recently, both of them deluxe pistol grip models, nice wood, but no finished guns, restoration projects. And of course, that's what we do here, is restore vintage firearms. So I thought, wow, I can get one of those reasonably priced, restore them, and either have a really cool Bullard for my collection or resell them, maybe make a little money. Not hardly. Both of them went hammered for $8,000 or more, which with all the premiums and everything else, close to $10,000 for a project done. So anyway, if you come across a Bullard for a reasonable price, well, jump on it. And if you don't, well, let me know, because I'm still looking for one and I can't afford them no more. Well, thanks for joining us today and taking a closer look at just how well these old Bullards can shoot. I mean, on top of being kind of a marvel of engineering for their time, they can be doggone good shooters as well. Until next time, happy trails from the Cody Shooting Complex in Cody, Wyoming.